Hi, everybody. My name is Manoj Ramnani, and I am the founder and CEO at SalesIntel. I'm excited to welcome you all on SalesIntel Show. This is a specific series designed for partnership, and I'm excited to have with me Bob Moore. Bob, welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be here. I was excited to do it and eager to geek out with you.
Perfect, perfect. So, first of all, how did we get to where we are, and why are we even having this roundtable regarding partnership? A little bit of a context. Beginning of this year, um, I decided, or I would say, my team, you know, gave me a nudge to come out of my engineering background CEO to be more outward facing. So I came out of my comfort zone and started a podcast series. And what we do at SalesIntel is, we help B2B companies generate pipeline, right? We give them data and intelligence. So we picked the series and named that Pipeline Pioneers, where our objective was to help the B2B leaders, the go-to-market leaders, learn from the experts, from the community, and from the practitioners as to how to generate the pipeline in 2024, right? What are the best ways to invest your dollars? And we gave them 100 pennies, and we asked them to distribute those 100 pennies across 10 different go-to-market channels. Those are sales-driven, marketing-driven, partnership-driven, event-driven, your founder-driven. So those are we are 10 channels where they could spend their 100 pennies. And fast forward 7 months into this, when we looked at the data coming from the 100 go-to-market practitioners and leaders, the number one channel where in 2024 everybody thought they were seeing the success, or everybody had the data that they were seeing the success, was from partnership. I was surprised because prior to that, partnership wasn't seen, 2022, 3, or even before that, wasn't seen as the number one channel to generate the pipeline and the revenue. So we decided to double click on that and understand more as to why partnership, what are the characteristics, what are other people seeing. So on my first roundtable series, I brought in Asher Matthews, Sangram from GTM, as well as Yarbrough, right? And these three folks have been immersed in the partnerships, right? They have spent a lot of time, and we looked at the data coming in from the companies that have embraced partnership as a go-to-market channel, and the numbers were just astonishing. Like, in a very, very positive way, we saw companies generating 32% more pipeline, companies sales cycle getting reduced, the ACV was increasing, and then further down, the churn numbers were showing out to be much more positive for the business. Today, I'm excited, Bob, to have the discussion as to, now that we have established that partnership is a real and the number one go-to-market channel for B2B professionals, what role do the systems and data provide, right? You have spent a fair bit of your professional life in designing the systems and that are data-driven, right, and providing it to the community. So with that background, I would love for you to, Bob, give us your background and double click on the systems a little bit, and then we'll geek out on the data part and the system intersections.
Yeah, what a great tee up, and I'll do my best not to rant for 45 minutes here. Definitely cut me off as I run through different topics, but I think you're talking about it in exactly the terms I like to use when speaking about this frankly this revolution that has happened in the way in which companies are choosing to invest in growth. And it's one that brings a lot of joy to me because to be honest, I'm not really a partnerships person by background. I'm a data nerd by background. So Crossbeam is my third SaaS company. The first two had nothing to do with partnerships. They were both very classic data analytics and data infrastructure SaaS businesses. One was called RJ Metrics, which is now part of Adobe. It was acquired in 2016. And one was called Stitch Data, which is now part of Click. It was acquired in 2018. Those businesses both had to do with, your classic business intelligence, like charts and dashboards and data pipelines. And, for your company analyzing your data within your silo, how can we be smart about who our best customers are and how to get more like them and things like that. So I spent 15 years of my career really immersed in helping companies use data to grow faster and to make smarter decisions. And after we sold Stitch, I probably should have taken a vacation, but I'm out of my mind and can't help myself. And I felt like I had one more in me. And there was this problem that I had been facing for the last 15 years that I was never able to solve at any of my companies or any of the businesses that acquired them. And that problem was we can work all day to build tools that help you analyze your data within your data silo. But there is this incredibly powerful part of how companies grow that involves collaborating with other businesses outside of their own walls. Partnerships is kind of a broad strokes label that you can put on it, but the way in which companies collaborate across company lines has always been this enormous vein of value and growth inside of most businesses, even at the startup scale. And yet the data has never been there because while you can buy all the greatest business intelligence tools to analyze your own data, there was still in 2018, 2019, when we started Crossbeam, no good way to answer the very simple question, hey, partner, how many customers do we have in common and who are they? Or, hey, partner, are my sales reps currently trying to sell to any of the same companies as your sales reps? Or, hey, partner, I know when somebody already uses your product, they're twice as likely to buy mine. Is anybody that came to my website today already a customer of yours? These fundamental questions were unanswerable because they required drawing this Venn diagram between your data, which you care about a lot and you protect really closely, and your partner's data, which they feel the same way about. And math is working against you because mathematically, you cannot draw a Venn diagram between two data sets unless you have all of the data from both of the sets. So in these circumstances, I may love you. You may be my greatest partner ever. We might collaborate really deeply. We might have a product integration, but I'm sorry, I won't and I can't give you my entire customer list. I
Yes.
won't and I can't give you a login to my CRM system so you can see every one of my active opportunities. And yet that's the only way to answer that question because the only way to draw that Venn diagram is to have all the data from both. So what happens? People get stuck in this paradox, this almost prisoner's dilemma situation where because they can't share everything, they don't share anything. And there's been this age-old practice known as account mapping that has existed since before computers, basically. But the modern form basically takes the form of people emailing spreadsheets back and forth with these very partial, very manually segmented, very narrow lists of theoretical accounts that might maybe overlap and then get manually matched up against one another. And account mapping is kind of this deep, dark secret inside of most companies, but there's not a company in the technology industry that's gotten to 100 million in revenue, maybe even 10 million in revenue without swapping some of these spreadsheets over the years. And it's a terrible process. The data's stale, it's insecure. The ability for you to miss things is always very high. And it's basically like playing Battleship, right? With your partner on the other side. Like, you have anything in D4? Nope, that's a miss, right?
Yeah.
So the vision behind Crossbeam was to fix this problem once and for all and to say, look, we have the tools. We have the tools we need to solve this. What we need to do is use the technology from the modern data stack. We need to use the maturity of the API economy, and we need to build something that's never existed before, which is basically this escrow service for data, this
Mhm.
secure, independent network that sits in between all the companies that want to collaborate with each other and provides a space where those companies can connect their CRM data but maintain ownership of it and have extremely explicit rules around who their partners are and within each partner relationship, who is allowed to see what, when, and under what circumstances. And then the network in the middle is actually able to do all the hard stuff, including drawing those Venn diagrams on each party's behalf, figuring out what's in the middle and releasing only the data that matters. And that was the core underlying concept behind Crossbeam back in 2018, late 2018. And frankly, behind Reveal as well, the other major player in the space, which we'll talk about a bit more in a minute. We got started around the same time. And these two companies really set out to build this precise network I just described. And frankly, it took 4 or 5 years for the thing to work. Because there was this massive cold start problem. It's like starting LinkedIn from scratch, right? Imagine you
Yeah.
sign up for LinkedIn and nobody's on it. It's a pretty bad product. So we took a really, thoughtful multi-year process in order to build up the network to the point where it's become the de facto standard where this kind of work gets done. Where today 30,000 companies, including 80% of the Bessemer Cloud Index and a number of large Fortune 500s are actively using it and endorsing it among their partner ecosystems. So that you asked your question around data and framing data, and we can get more into the applications and why those survey results are the way they are, because that's kind of what happened next. But just to give a little bit of context and history for those new to the space, Crossbeam is the data, right? Crossbeam is the network that enables you to get this data that would have historically been locked up in account mapping and otherwise unable to scale.
Yeah. So this is very good context and a background, Bob. First of all, congratulations on the merger of the two companies, Reveal and Crossbeam. What's the thesis behind 1+1 is 3 market consolidation? We are bigger together, or there were complementary services and the offering that Reveal brought to Crossbeam and vice versa.
Yeah, this was all about customers and what they wanted, to be honest. And I may just sound like a good CEO wearing my marketing hat by saying that, but it really is the like intellectually honest, authentically true answer, because both Crossbeam and Reveal, you look at those companies independently and they're both great companies. Like Crossbeam's backed by Andreessen Horowitz, very well funded, tons of runway, growing at a really good clip, like a really exciting business. Reveal backed by Insight Partners, growing really good. And we bump into each other in the market a lot, but there was also huge pieces of the market that either one of us just kind of like were independently successful in, right? Like they're based in Paris, so they had a really big European presence. Their founders had come from the HR tech space, so they did really well in HR tech. Meanwhile, we're based on the East Coast of the U.S. We've got a big New York and San Francisco customer base contingent. I'm from the analytics space, so all the modern analytics companies use the platform. It's kind of funny looking at the map, right, of the two ecosystems. So why on earth would we bring these companies together? Why would any of us enter into a transaction that obviously has dilutive effects and other things to bring the companies together? And the answer is, if you went to any one of our product meetings in the last 2 years and you combed through the data and you looked at the #1 most requested feature from our customer base at Crossbeam, it was please merge with Reveal. And if you went to Reveal's product pipeline meetings and all the great things we want to build and all the ways that the value might show up, and you look for the #1 requested feature, it was please merge with Crossbeam. Because I'll use that LinkedIn analogy from before. Imagine a world where there are 2 LinkedIns and all of your contacts from your first job are on one LinkedIn, and all your contacts from your current job are on another LinkedIn. Which LinkedIn Sales Navigator product do you buy? Which one do you use to actually understand, the best pathway to a connection, to a second degree connection or something? If the data is bifurcated across 2 networks, it's not just 1+1 = 2 or 1+1 = 3. It's actually that like 0 + 0 = 1, right? It's like you cannot materialize the vision behind why these things got started in the first place until there is just one LinkedIn, right? Until there's one singular network. And that's just the nature of how the product works, and what allows us to then build all these exciting things that unlock the value that comes downstream from it. But thankfully, so thankfully, Simone Boucher, their CEO, and myself are both very long-term minded folks with very patient, thoughtful investors. And it took us about 1.5 years to actually make this thing materialize, but we did. And we set our egos aside and we said, we are going to go after the greater good around what our customers want and combine our forces in this way. And that really was the thesis. And what a great group of people. The Reveal team, which now makes up about 40% of the combined company, is just incredible, exceptionally hard workers, super smart. So glad to be building together side by side with them now.
That's great. And congratulations to both of you and your team. And I agree with you. The network effect, when the network is bigger, the effect is exponential for the end customer.
Right.
So, Bob, before we get into data, I have one question. So you have been seeing this partnership since 2018. The platform is emerging. You're seeing the customers joining this. And then all of a sudden, 2024 comes in and partnership become like the #1 channel through which we all leaders go and generate the revenue. I remember my first 21 years ago, a federal consulting business, we went to market essentially relying on the larger SIs, Accentures and Booz Allens of the world, and very seldom did anything come out of it, despite
Yeah.
you knocking the door so many times. So why all of a sudden a shift in the market in 2024?
Yeah. So I'll start by saying this. We didn't do it, right? If Crossbeam had never existed, if Reveal had never existed, this would all still be happening. And there would be some other company in our place, right? That was kind of sitting in this exact spot, unlocking the data. I'd say that we were necessary, but not sufficient conditions in order for this kind of radical disruption to be happening. It's a confluence of factors, but the thing that I point to most readily is the end of the zero interest rate phenomenon and the increase in interest rates that's been kind of hitting us and or at least the sustained relatively high interest rates that we've been living within for the last year. We lived through in the second half of 2022 and throughout 2023, kind of what's been sometimes referred to as like the SaaS apocalypse, right? These massive waves of layoffs, which by the way continue to today. We're all just desensitized to them. And in the midst of all of that happening, there was a lot of uncertainty, and I think a lot of companies kind of froze in place, not quite knowing what their budgets were going to look like next quarter, not quite knowing what their growth mandates were going to look like, not quite knowing if frankly they were going to have a job, right? People inside of most operating companies. And where we are now is while it's not clear that interest rates are going to stay at this level where they are for that much longer and may start tapering down somewhat. Regardless, people have gotten on firmer footing about feeling like they're in the new normal. So we went from this high flying zero interest rate phenomenon, this ZERP era, where you could spend an unlimited amount of money in order to add an extra dollar of revenue, right? Like your burn multiple was kind of meaningless because money was free and was abundant. And that led to everybody buying every tool. And your real focus was on volume and kind of this like everybody was buying everybody else's product because everybody had unlimited budget. So it was just this like perpetuating cycle that kind of built up this bubble in technology. And then we go into the SaaS apocalypse period where people are kind of just frozen and no one's really doing anything from an innovation standpoint. And it's a time where everybody kind of hits the reset button a little bit from a team structure standpoint, from a goals standpoint, from what's actually practical and real, and watching the public markets for earnings releases to see like how are the big people figuring this out, right? So now we've got a couple quarters of that under our belt, and we're saying, okay, well, we're in the new normal now. Maybe there's more cuts coming. Maybe there's not inside of any random company that you grab, but there's not going to be this massive, surprising disruption that deviates from this new norm. However, there's still some companies out there growing really well, and there is still capital out there to be had. And we do have some optimism that rates will taper down in the coming years, although probably much more gradually than they went down in the pandemic and climbed back up in 22 and 23. So now people are saying, okay, what works? And the definition of works has changed because it used to be that it was kind of like growth at all costs. And now we're in this spot where multiple things need to be true at the same time. There needs to be scalability to the strategy, right? You need to be able to think about, okay, this is going to be something that's not just a growth hack that's going to work one time. It's got to be something that's sustainable and that will grow with my business at the magnitude that my business needs it to. But it also needs to be affordable, and it needs to be something where you can understand the inputs and outputs and the ROI and the investment level necessary in order to do it. And then the third thing is the specter of AI that has come into play that has basically completely leveled all of the ways that we think about like growth strategy historically. And I could spend an hour talking about this, but you name it, right? Whether it's cold outbound outreach or it's classic inbound style SEO strategy, or it's anything from a advertising and targeted advertising standpoint. The combination of AI and the regulation that has shown up around data and personal data and the carefulness with which we all need to execute around that have all led to this state where the old playbooks just don't work as well. They might work, you could throw a lot of money at them, but you probably have to spend $2 to make a dollar. And while that was cool in the ZERP era, it's not cool now. So this now is all going on. All these factors are going on. And then you get Crossbeam and the data that comes out of these tools like Crossbeam and Reveal, which kind of serves up on a silver platter the ability for you to understand contextually what is going on around every single potential buyer that you might work with that lands in your sales pipeline, that's on your prospect list. You get to know not just what you know, but what the partners in your ecosystem know as well. And it turns out that that is probably some of the most valuable buying signal that could exist out there, because people are buying differently in this era too. People don't just buy products because they like the UI anymore, because their sales rep bought them the best round of golf. People buy products because of how they interoperate with the other products and services they're already using. The number one input to someone making a technology decision is how compatible it is with the existing pieces of the stack that they already have. It doesn't matter what vertical you're in. The API economy has created this massive unbundling cycle where like no one buys a shrink wrap piece of software and runs it in isolation anymore. Everything is about interoperability and APIs and kind of the ways in which data works its way through the different pieces of your business, right? So what that means is, as someone trying to sell software, you can look at a given buyer and know what else is going on in terms of what they've bought, when, and in what order. And you can understand a lot about your alignment with them. Are they in your ideal customer profile? How should you position and sell to them? And is now the right time for you to be doing that? And there's only one source of data that'll tell you those things, and it's your partner ecosystem. That's who knows it. You can't know it from the outside looking in. So I think in this moment where all these things are true, it's this incredible confluence of things, ecosystems and ecosystem-led growth becomes this kind of phoenix that rises from the ashes of the SaaS apocalypse. That is, wow, this is actually how we collectively as a technology industry are going to be growing together and finding success in the next decade.
Yeah, this is good. And the unit economics, as we saw with the go-to-market partners and Azure at Partnership Leadership, they're collecting all this data. The unit economics are proving it out, right?
Oh yeah,
that all the KPIs are going in the right direction. So that's good. Shift the gears. When I look at the partnership, I put them into 4 stages for our business. Identifying your ideal customer, in ideal partner profile, right? Validating in the second phase that, yep, what your assumptions around who you go to market with, who you do the integration, who are you better together story with, right? In terms of partnership, validating in the second phase. Then third, operationalizing it. A big part of partnership is not just signing a paper and hope that the deals will start to fall. It's about operationalizing internally with your go-to-market team, as well as externally with your partner. And then the last is KPIs, like how do you measure what your thesis was, in terms of the pipeline that's being generated, the revenue that's coming in, all the other metrics in between. So in those four phases, let's just take each phase and spend a few minutes on that. What role does data play, in your mind, Bob, when someone subscribe to your solution and say, what, I'm out there trying to find the partners. What's that process look like? What are the data elements that go into figuring out the ideal partner profile?
Yeah. So I think what data does is it blows up your construct a little bit. And in one major way, which is in these stages of standing up a partner program or building an ecosystem. The way you describe them, they kind of, they're these progressive steps that kind of fall like dominoes. And when you reach the promised land at the end and there's actual performance to measure, what you get is KPIs, right? What you get is some measurement, some articulation of, okay, here's the value that's been created by this ecosystem. I would posit that the data being available actually allows you to take that last domino, that KPIs domino, and put it at the beginning instead of putting it at the end. And it allows you to, from the original question that you want to ask about whether or not we should do this in the first place with a given partner, whether or not we should, whether it's building an integration or if it's a service partner or system integrator, it's investing the resources to get them trained, to get them certified, and doing whatever you need to do to stand that up and putting the economic arrangements in place. Before any of that investment takes place, the data can already be there for you to do some very, very important material work that will help you predict whether or not it's going to actually be effective in the first place. And some of the questions you can ask around that, I talk about this a bit in my book, Ecosystem-Led Growth. Hey, available on Amazon and Wiley and everything else. Be sure to pick one up. So in that book, we talk about this 2x2 matrix, right? Where there are 2 dimensions on which you can score a prospective partner. One of the dimensions is just the the magnitude of overlap that exists between your ideal customer profiles, right? And this is a really simple thing you can do in Crossbeam before you've done any other work. You can do it on the free tier of Crossbeam. You can both be on the free tier and go in and do this. And you can look at it and say, how many customers do we have in common? Who are they? What's the intersection look like of our sales pipeline as well? When we throw events and you throw events, like what's the intersection of our ICP there? Tons of data analysis you can do just at the data level, very, very low lift, which will tell you about just almost like the serviceable, obtainable market that exists between you and this prospective partner. That's one dimension. But the other dimension is the who cares dimension, which is when you do actually have a relationship that coexists with this partner. So out there in the universe, for the folks that have happened to be working with both of you, despite the fact that your partnership doesn't exist, what is true about those companies that is not true about the rest of your sales pipeline and the rest of your focus ideal customer profile? And the analysis that you can do is, do the deals close faster? Are these companies less likely to churn? Are the ACVs more in the target range that you really care about? Are you more likely to win competitively when this partner's technology or services are already present inside this organization? These are highly, highly predictive indicators that can tell you what the actual net impact of investing in this relationship with this partner is and attempting to better cross-pollinate the universe of people that you work with and the people that they work with. And when you score on this 2x2 matrix, you can, and by the way, and that dimension also comes right out of Crossbeam, right? So you're able to not just know who overlaps, but you can then do the next tier data analytics around like, okay, what's the ACV, what's the close rate, et cetera, just for the intersections with this partner or prospective partner. So then you get, classic scatter plot, right? And you can kind of like four box it. And there's going to be partners where it's a tiny market and nobody cares. There's not a lot of impact, and you probably don't want to spend time with them. There's going to be partners where they have a really large addressable market, but maybe the impact of working with that partner or your customers using that partner, it's kind of negligible or not a big impact. That might be a great co-marketing partner. It might be a good volume play for you to just get exposure and grow your megaphone, but it's not going to matter deeper down in your funnel. The inverse, right? You've got companies that the impact is really high, but the addressable market's relatively small. Well, for those companies, this probably is something where it's worth investing energy to kind of co-enable your sales teams to co-sell. Whenever there is a presence of that partner, you should jump on it, but you can't rely on it actually being like the means by which you're going to 10x your company. It's more of a force multiplier, and you figure out how to take a measured approach there and do that in volume, right? Try to figure out how to asynchronously or with an automated way, like stand up as many of those as possible without it being a major strategic investment for your company. And then you look at that top right quadrant and you look at the companies where there's volume and there's impact. And for every business we've ever worked with, there are companies in that quadrant. And in fact, most partnerships that are the ones that occur to you as, oh yeah, that's the important one for me, they end up landing there. Like your intuition tends to be right, but those are the ones where you pour your business's energy into it, and they create this just incredible effect that is not just a force multiplier on the immediate pipeline. It changes the constitution of what your pipeline actually is over the long term. So in that way, and sorry to hijack the framework of your question, but like that final domino, that KPI domino that falls, it moves. Those are the same KPIs, by the way, you're going to be measuring after you stand it all up, right? You're going to land on those KPIs and you're going to say, okay, for deals where the partner was present in this account, whether we involve them or not, you can talk about influence versus sourced, right? But you can do both of those analyses and you can say, oh, wow, we closed more deals faster at a higher ACV when that partner was present. And our investments in that partner have been what brought that larger presence to bear. So the KPIs bookend it. They don't happen at the end. And that's the thing that gives you confidence in making the investment in the first place. So that's why data is such a key piece.
That's makes sense. So bigger is not always better, right? The intersection of the two Venn diagrams, as you mentioned, maybe bigger in some case, but the downstream impact maybe lower, right? So you use that for a different use case to increase your brand footprints, but not necessarily the revenue.
It's true. And that's actually why we talk about this in the terms of ecosystem-led growth rather than partner-led growth. And like I kind of stay away from the term partnerships as much as I can because A, it's got kind of a stigma to it that bears all the weight of the historical shortcomings of the performance of the space that you alluded to. B, PLG is already taken, right? Product-led growth has done a pretty good job of that. But C, most importantly, these plays are not about one partner. They're about your ecosystem. And very often, if your sales team is evaluating a prospective deal or trying to figure out the way to position this crucial sales pitch that's happening, you're not just looking at one partner's data. You're not just relying on what one partner knows. You're looking at what your ecosystem knows. You want to bear hug your prospects with the data and context of the totality of your ecosystem. And it's very rare that one Venn diagram is going to dictate the whole thing. What you really want is that top left quadrant, all those people that really can impact it. It's them. It's like the area under the long tail of the curve, right? Like they add up to being as impactful as one giant hyperscaler partner could be at the head of the curve.
That makes sense. This is very, very insightful. Now I understand. I have your book. I was
Oh,
looking.
awesome.
I was looking in my collection there. I have your book. Very well written. Um, so the validation, Bob, of yes, I have picked the right partner, is in the 2x2 matrix, right? You look at it
Yeah.
and say, what is my end goal? Is my end goal is to generate immediate revenue with a healthy pipeline. That's your top right. And then if my goal is to get the brand awareness across the board, then larger number of clients, but they're not as healthy compared to my top right
Right.
corner.
Yeah.
So that's where you get the validation. Let's just touch on the accuracy of data, right? The topic that's near and dear to our heart. We at SalesIntel, we provide data and intelligence to sales and marketing teams. A shameless plug here, and for them to generate the top of the funnel, right? Whether your go-to-market channel is sales driven, in back in 22 when the money was available, or in partnership in 2024, where your dollar has to go a long way. Yeah, the unit economics have to make sense. The accuracy of data dictates everything downstream.
Yeah.
Have you seen how the partners who have their CRM systems pristine, when they bring the data, and the impact of that using Crossbeam versus the ones that haven't done as good of a job?
Yeah. This is a great question, and it actually. I often say that Crossbeam could have never been a founder's first company because it really is just a byproduct of all of this weird, muscle memory and scar tissue from the past companies that I built. But my second company, Stitch Data, we were in the business of data pipelines and data cleansing and kind of the classic like extract, transform, load process that businesses go through in piping data out of various systems into destinations. Very much suffers from that garbage in, garbage out problem that you're describing, right? And if you want to build something like Crossbeam, where it's not about just one company's data, but it's about kind of like multiplying one company's data by another company's data and then 20 more partners' data, then you get this like, n to the 20th power level of garbage in, garbage out. It's like, garbage in and you get like a garbage dump out the other side. So how do you avoid that dumpster fire of data? There's actually one thing that is a truism that has really, really helped guide us through that. So first of all, there's a bunch of stuff that's kind of like it's hard and it's complicated and it's boring, but we're really good at it, which relates to being able to get everybody's data, regardless of where it's coming from, into one singular universal data model, right? So if I use Salesforce and my partner uses HubSpot, and a third partner of mine is like a mom and pop agency that uses Google Sheets, and then somebody else is on, Microsoft Dynamics, and how is it that you can all cooperate and coexist on Crossbeam? That's part of what we do, right? That's part of the core IP of the platform is like this data mapping that puts everybody in this universal data model at the time that the matches happen, and then maps it back to your original CRM and pushes it back when you're done. That's part of if you're a big data nerd, that's part of the coolest things we do. And if you're not, it's probably the most boring thing I've said so far on this webinar. But the garbage in, garbage out problem is solved by, in that transformation process, when you are actually getting your data mapped into that universal data model, we do not take all of your data. In fact, where the garbage is in a lot of these garbage in, garbage out situations is in the extremely large and poorly manicured backlog of accounts and leads and contacts that has persisted for as long as any given business has persisted, and has just kind of accumulated as junk and not been pruned as people have left companies or email addresses have been updated or domain names have changed or whatever else. So you end up with, in any given company's like CRM system, maybe 5% of the data is actually relevant right now to the company, and the rest is that garbage, right? So we focus on that 5%. And how do we know which 5% is the 5%? Well, we rely on these things called populations. And a population in Crossbeam is basically just a segment of data that is mapped against a really specific report that you probably run every single day at your company. And that encapsulates that 5% of the data. That's good. So no matter how bad your Salesforce is, no matter how poorly maintained it is, I bet that your sales leader can run a report that tells them which open opportunities are likely to close this quarter. And I bet that
Yes.
report is pretty darn accurate, right? If there's one thing that is maintained actively, that's a living, breathing organism inside of your company, it's that, because you can't forecast without it, and people are going to lose their jobs if it's not done right. So, well, it just so happens that that very same report is maybe the most useful and interesting atomic unit of knowledge that could go into Crossbeam, right? Because like, who am I actively selling to now that I want to get across the finish line in some, near-term time period where the influence or the data or the relationships from a partner ecosystem might shape the way that I do that. So we use the fact that companies do a really good job of maintaining who's my customer right now and who do I really want to sell to right now. And those are the two key populations that are crafted and that are inputs to Crossbeam. And in Crossbeam, you can replicate the exact logic from any Salesforce report in defining the population. So if you can show that report in Salesforce, you can curate that population in Crossbeam, and it will actually dynamically over time evolve to get rid of the closed lost opportunities, move the closed ones into the customers, new opportunities get open, get moved into that population. And it's dynamic and very real. And then you can always create other custom populations, like every prospect I've ever talked to, every badge I've ever scanned at a trade show, churned customers, you can do all kinds of segmentations as you can imagine. But basically, we just do everything we can to make sure the garbage never even makes it into Crossbeam in the first place. And that does so much to solve the garbage in, garbage out concerns that people otherwise run into.
Very, very smart. So I'm a data guy, we run a data company,
Yeah.
and those who get their hands dirty with the data, they know the data is really dirty. It takes a lots of efforts to take the gold out of tons of data that sits in CRM systems. Let's switch the gears a little bit. Now that we have decided that go-to-market leaders are respecting partnership, they have tools, data, systems. What kind of infrastructure do they set up internally and externally to ensure that their go-to-market teams are positioned to be successful in a given partnership?
Yeah, and this is where I prefer to not think about this as being actually like a separate island or separate universe than what you conventionally would have with a classic like revenue operations organization. These data and relationships that exist and that are so powerful that come out of the partner ecosystem, they're not a different beast or a different operating model or a different operating system from the way in which most companies conventionally think about demand generation, lead qualification, using SDRs or the like to engage with qualified prospects or to qualify prospects in the first place. Account execs and how they get enabled with data and with workflows and with messaging to close deals. This is a force multiplier to all of that stuff. And I think the smartest way to think about bringing an ecosystem lens to the table when it comes to think about the growth of your company is to look at how you have grown the most successfully in the past and how you can actually overlay this context from the ecosystem world onto that. So there's plenty of like legacy partner tech out there. There's like partner relationship management systems and like training and enablement systems and things. We don't spend a lot of time with those companies. We like them. They're cool people. We love hanging out at the partner trade shows, and we do have some choice integrations with a few of them. But the integrations that we see that really make an impact are like we integrate with call recording software and conversation intelligence software vendors. We integrate with outbound automation vendors who help automate SDR email sends and customization. We automate with workflow tools. We have some really cool partnerships coming up with some of the big emerging vendors in the space of like AI powered customer qualification and outbound workflow automation. And these are all things that get bought by RevOps teams, right? These are all things that get implemented by the pieces of the business that are in charge of helping sellers actually do their job and do the work of moving things down the pipeline. So, the nice thing about all this, and maybe this is part of why it's so compelling from a low cost of getting stood up perspective, is that it's not new. It's just sprinkles on the cupcake. Or, maybe it's another entire layer of icing on the cupcake. But it is something that the best way to do it is to weave it in with the people and the processes that you've figured out how to do and just make those things work better by being smarter and having richer data and making, taking better actions as a result of that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. My last question topic for us, Bob. There are a lot of KPIs that we measure, right? Pipeline generation, brand awareness, all the way to deal velocity, ACV, and the churn score. Is there anything that the market today is not measuring that you think, if your ecosystem-led growth is your go-to-market strategy, then you must look at this one or two or handful of KPIs?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think this is going to feel like a cop-out answer, but I actually think the most important KPIs for your business are the same exact North Star KPIs that are going to show up in your boardroom. And one of the biggest mistakes that historical, like legacy partnership teams have made is by creating a universe of their own KPIs, right? And their own OKRs and their own terminology and their own three-letter acronyms that all make a ton of sense within the domain of like the partnerships stuff. But if you ask anybody else at the company about them, they don't understand what they are and how they work, right? And when you talk about measuring things like, hey, how many integrations did we build, or how do you define like partner influenced revenue in these really, bespoke, wonky ways, or how many lead registrations came in? You think those things are showing up in the board deck at the end of the quarter? Like there are so many steps removed from the way that the actual decision making and investments happen inside of a company that dictate whether or not this stuff is working. The best possible metric for if your company's ARR is your North Star, the best metric for a partnership team is ARR. And there are ways to kind of cut at that and maybe like draw more direct lines between the work you do and what ARR has come in. And that's all fine. But the more you get abstracted away from what's being talked about in those boardrooms, the less relevant you're guaranteeing that you're going to be as a partner organization. So this is birds of the same feather, right? To my last answer. This stuff is not partner stuff. This stuff is company stuff. This stuff is growth stuff. This stuff is revenue stuff. And it's go-to-market. It's just part of the go-to-market portfolio of assets. And the fact that it's powered by the ecosystem, again, that ecosystem is a necessary but not sufficient piece of actually bringing something really material to life here. And the reason that you're seeing this big change right now, getting back to your original thesis, right, is it's happening because of that. It's happening because we are piercing the ecosystem echo chamber and more tightly integrating the benefits of those partner ecosystems into the way that companies grow from a first principles standpoint instead of existing on an island.
So the moral of the story is don't be cute, don't get fancy, just focus on the fundamentals. If ARR is your true north or the North Star metric for the business, then that's your partnership metric.
Don't get stuck at the kids' table. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Bob, thank you so much. I enjoyed it. It was an amazing session, and I'm sure our audience are going to get a lot of insights if partnership or the ecosystem-led growth is one of their motion.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast.
Thank you.